Clinomania is a psycho-emotional state in which a person spends an enormous amount of time in bed, feeling a strong desire not to leave their sleeping place. This condition is characterized by an inability to get up in the mornings, a constant urge to be in bed as soon as possible, and to stay there throughout the day. On weekends, such individuals may spend entire days watching TV, listening to music, or reading books, but all while lying down, rejecting any attempts to suggest going somewhere or engaging in active tasks. Importantly, they usually do not complain about obvious health problems. Doctors have not prescribed bed rest, their bodies are capable of movement and normal function, and tests show no signs of illness. There are no clear physiological reasons for this behavior, and often the person continues to live and function without apparent physical limitations. So, what is clinomania and why does it occur? Clinomania is a condition characterized by a persistent and strong desire to stay in bed, often accompanied by a lack of motivation for physical activity and social engagement. It is not just laziness or temporary fatigue after a hard day but a serious psycho-emotional disorder that requires intervention from a specialist, such as a psychologist or psychotherapist. Those suffering from clinomania seem to seek a secluded place where they can hide from the outside world to restore their energy, isolating themselves from others and disconnecting internally from reality. Such behavior is a way of psychological avoidance of problems, stresses, or conflicts, hiding in inner anxiety. Many psychiatrists note symptoms of depression, anxiety disorders, or even signs of schizophrenia in such individuals, while psychologists tend to avoid making severe diagnoses because they often lack the full picture. They attribute this behavior to apathy, chronic fatigue, or internal worries. Approaches to treatment vary. Some may lean toward medication, others toward psychological work. However, it's impossible to definitively say which method is more appropriate because clinomania remains one of the most mysterious and understudied states. Why does clinomania occur? In psychological literature, two main reasons are identified. The first is a critical decrease in mental resources, manifesting as an inability to interact normally socially or perform routine tasks. In such cases, the psyche attempts to recover, and the bed becomes a natural refuge where a person feels safe and comfortable. Subconsciously, we choose this space because it's seen as the most cozy. The sleeping environment is where one feels vulnerable yet protected. Otherwise, we wouldn't spend so much time there, since sleep inherently involves losing control over the situation, and any threats should be absent. Therefore, the attempt to recharge, a logical mechanism, allows one to quickly return to a resourceful state without straining the mind or muscles. The second reason is related to external stimuli. Research shows that many people subconsciously compare their bed to a mother's womb, symbolizing absolute safety and protection. This space provides a sense of complete security, fulfilling the need for protection from external threats. For instance, if someone fears an encounter, feels stressed at work, or is anxious about upcoming events, their psyche compels them to stay in bed to minimize risks and avoid confrontations. In this case, the bed becomes not only a place of rest but also a kind of shelter from reality. Overall, it involves an internal conflict, a lack of an exit from the situation, or a sense of isolation from the surrounding world. Symptoms of clinomania are not always obvious. There is no clear-cut symptomatology. We can only observe facts such as complaints about severe fatigue, a sharp mood decline, apathy, refusal to meet obligations, procrastination, and unwillingness to change. In some cases, a person may stay in bed for several days straight, rejecting any activity. It's important to understand what exactly triggers this habit, as it can reveal much about the underlying causes. If someone sleeps a lot but does not engage in reading, watching series, or listening to music, it's likely a sign of critical resource depletion. They may have experienced prolonged stress or worked at their limit for a long time, leading to emotional and physical burnout. As a result, their psyche disconnects, and the person feels the need to simply lie down and do nothing to give themselves a break. This state is a protective response of the body to overload, when one feels like nothing is wanted and that one cannot do anything. Conversely, if a person remains in bed but feels alert, fresh, and energetic, it likely indicates an internal problem related to external threats or unresolved conflicts. This is especially common in children facing difficult situations but unable or unwilling to share them with adults. Parents should pay attention to such signs because beneath apathy and laziness may lie serious psychological trauma, for example, violence or emotional pressure. In such cases, clinomania is a signal of internal trauma that needs urgent attention. Most often, the reasons behind clinomania are less severe than they initially seem. For example, an unpleasant atmosphere at work, conflicts with colleagues, bullying at school, or bullying from classmates. I have encountered stories where a girl stayed in bed for 4 days straight because she was afraid of encountering her ex-boyfriend outside. He lived in a nearby house. Any unwanted situation outside the apartment can trigger this condition. It's important to remember that causes can be diverse and often quite mundane. How to combat clinomania? In most cases, assistance from a specialist is necessary because it's very difficult to understand the root problem alone. You don't necessarily need to see a psychiatrist or psychotherapist immediately. Often, working with a psychologist who can help identify the causes and find ways out of the state is enough. The main thing is not to ignore the issue or hope it will resolve itself. Suppressing emotions with medication or repressing them is ineffective because the root lies in the soul and psyche, not in physiology. The most critical step is to correctly prioritize. Spending a lot of time in bed is not necessarily a sign of illness. Sometimes, it's part of the recovery process. It's important to allow yourself to relax without guilt or blame. As long as this state does not interfere with fulfilling obligations, damage social relationships, or hinder work, it should not be considered a pathology. Sometimes, it's helpful to let yourself do nothing a little to regain strength. Psychologists also recommend paying attention to sleep and wake routines. Don't allow burnout or overexertion. Your body cannot operate at full capacity forever. The more stress you experience, the more likely apathy and clinomania will develop. It's important not to suppress feelings and problems, but to openly talk about them. Techniques such as I statements, which allow expressing complaints and dissatisfaction without blame or aggression, can help reduce internal tension and conflicts, improving your psycho-emotional state. Distinguish between motivation and discipline. Some tasks require immediate action, driven by strong motivation, for example, solving an urgent problem or completing an important project. Others benefit from a gradual approach and systematic execution, like maintaining a healthy lifestyle, proper nutrition, or regular exercise. Trying to change life quickly without a plan often leads to burnout and increases the risk of falling back into apathy and lying in bed. It's also important to avoid overloading at work or in personal life. Excessive pressure, poor time management, or constant stress contribute to the development of a therapeutic state. In such situations, the psyche blocks any attempts to return to active life, leading to isolation and, over time, clinomania. In conclusion, it's essential to understand that clinomania is not a separate mental disorder but rather a symptom of a critical resource depletion or a consequence of traumatic environmental conditions. Suppressing this state with medication does not solve the problem, it only masks it. It's important to verbalize your worries, understand their causes, and work toward inner harmony. For chronic fatigue and overload, giving yourself time and opportunities to recover is necessary. If fears or conflicts are the cause, seeking ways to resolve them or getting support will help. Else, clinomania will gradually fade, making room for healthier and more balanced states.